discover liberation just have vastly different understandings of what liberation is for.
I haven't seen this much importance and attention.
The story itself is a really wonderful, really great setup.
Tractor beam has been engaged.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tractor Beam Comics Reviews on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. My name is Matthew Neugebauer, coming to you live from the Star Wars Underworld North studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And as always, I'm joined by Chris Abbott himself down in Underworld, New Jersey. I'm going to call it that from now on. How you doing, Chris? Oh, I think you're muted. No, shoot. There we go. Anyway, I'll keep on going and let you figure that audio part out. But yeah, today is also Star Wars Podcast Day. Let me get that banner up. There we go. And yeah, just show what that plug is. Yeah, so it's Star Wars Podcast Day. It's the 25th anniversary of Jedi Talks is the podcast from 2020. Would have been what year would that? 1999, just before the Phantom Menace. And so this great fandom initiative that we're getting together and just talking about celebrating Star Wars podcasting. It's grown by leaps and bounds, and so happy to be a part of that. We are the comic book review arm of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. Of course, more well known for their flagship podcast on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. But yeah, here we are on Wednesdays usually talking about comics. Usually we review whatever books come out that day. Today there was a comic book that we would review, Mace Windu. We're going to review that next week. It's a normal Wednesday for me, at least. So we're going to review that next week. But then, yeah, because we got something special today, as advertised for Star Wars Podcast Day. It is the one and only Ethan Sachs. I'm going to bring him in right now.
Woo, yeah.
There we go. And Chris, good to know we can hear you. Ethan, welcome to the Tractor Beam Comics Reviews, Tractor Beam Podcast, and of course, fresh off the Bounty Hunters run. How's it going down in NYC?
It's going well. Thank you very much. Appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Chris, we can hear you just to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right.
Yes.
All right. Technical difficulty.
Yeah. Last we left off, we had met in London actually for my panel that I put together with you, Adam, Christopher, Dominic, Kieran, Matt. We all had a fun conversation about bounty hunters, and I'll never forget when you walked up on stage with the Bosk mask. That was just great. We had a Dengar, amazing cosplayer, just standing vigil on our great panel, and it was a full room. It was amazing.
Oh, there we go.
So that was can't get this on with
he's
my
doing it again.
headphones.
That warms my heart so much.
I want that so much. Oh man, yeah. So
I have a high standard of professionalism. When you invite me on.
Well, here's the thing. So here's the thing you don't know is I literally have a prequelist T-shirt. I'm a hardcore die in the wall. Revenge of the Sith is the greatest film of all time. The prequel era is my jam. So to hear you repping it, to know that you're writing a book set in the era, and we'll get to that hopefully at the end. Definitely at the end. So yeah, thanks for showing us the Django mask. We'll get to that in a bit. First off, I do want to get into it. It's a question, kind of a general question for you, Ethan. What's a day in the life like? What's a comic writer and you in particular? I know the industry's changed over the decades and over the years. For you, what is a day in the life, and then kind of the process for writing a comic book overall?
Well, I will say the less romantic version of this is pretty much this is what I look like for most of my waking hours, because I'm literally sitting at my computer at my desk. And I'm just going to flip this screen for a second. So like, this is what I look at when when I'm working, just a bunch of nerdy stuff. Those action figures are all characters that I've written and that I love and are like trophies. So basically I, being the adult I am, sit here looking at these toys, get inspired and do a lot of writing. The less romantic I guess, version is that I a lot of it is like you got to do outlines, and first you got to do pitches, talk to editors, um, do outlines, and uh, it's very kind of granular. So like that's a little bit probably less romantic than people think, but it's always fun. I mean, you're basically paid to daydream, So yeah, but I'm very methodical because I need the outlines. I need to sort of budget my time, especially if I'm working on multiple things.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is you have kind of this open structure to, but you have a deadline in your mind. Like, okay, today I'm going to finish like, I don't know, whatever amount of pages or however amount of this story. And I feel like that was a good day for me,
Mhm.
right? Some kind of parameters, I guess.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
exactly.
And
Like,
no, go ahead.
okay, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, you mentioned outlines and structure and just plotting things through. One of the things that really struck us both about Bounty Hunters, especially. I mean, everything you've done, but definitely Bounty Hunters 40 issue comic or 42 issue comic run. Sorry, it's right here. Really came to a satisfying end. It came to, it was very clear when, in October when it was announced that this would be the last issue or around there. Yeah, sad to see it go, but that felt right. And again, that's very hard to do. We said that about with Alyssa Wong with Afra as well. Uh, what do you find makes that difficult? This satisfying end that's charted out over such a long period, and how do you find you're able to do it well? What's the thought process in terms of seeding things in earlier that'll pay off later, and just plotting a longer story out like that?
Well, I think you're giving me a lot of credit there because I think when I started Bounty Hunters,
Hmm.
I was a little naive, right? Like I would have these threads that I was like, oh, I'll get to tie them off eventually. We had no idea how long it would last. If it was a gift that it lasted 4 years in this, comic book
Mhm.
period where just there are fewer ongoings and there are, more frequent reboots and things like that. So the chance to do that and also to, for the vast majority of it, have the same artist was, something that really made a difference with the cohesiveness of the storytelling. I will say that some of the threads I was able to tie in that issue 42. If it was, canceled at 22, as long as I had a little bit of runway before, some of that would have happened. I always, after we knew that we were going to go past the first arc without being canceled, I definitely had the idea throughout the like. I knew what Valence's arc was going to be. He was going
Mhm.
to be this veteran who was catastrophically injured, had put himself together, back together physically,
Mhm.
but was still broken emotionally, and it was like he was still like fixing himself. Like he was gonna grow by the end of the series. It's very much like a soldier with PTSD. And I
Mhm.
knew in my mind that I wanted that last shot to be. This is a bit of a spoiler for all of you out there who haven't read
That's
42, but I wanted him to have his hand out to the reader,
Mhm.
smile on his face. I didn't know who was going to be on the other end of that, but I wanted him to say something to the effect of, it's a big galaxy. I have no idea what's next, but you want to find out with me. I knew that was going to be the rough version of the last line pretty
Mhm.
much from the beginning. So, um, that's an example of something that I was writing towards. But then there were things that happened that you could never plan for. Like, for example, Cadelia.
Right.
For those of you who haven't read Bounty Hunters, she's like this heir to two warring syndicates, and a lot of, she's just a kid, but a lot of people put, a lot of pressure on her because she could either be used or, elevated to sort of maybe bring peace to the underworld. Kind of that was the initial idea, and that she was going to be with Valance for longer than 2 issues. But then Grogu happened, and we were sitting around going, well, maybe this is a little too close to that. So then we were like, okay, well, let's. And so we
Mhm.
sort of,
Yeah.
then Charles took her into War of the Bounty Hunters, made her Kira's protege, and that story got even better, I think. Um, under Charles' expert, storytelling. And then we were thinking of I was thinking of bringing her back, but then Bad Batch happened.
Right.
And I
I
was
was
like,
gonna say Omega. Yeah.
yeah, I just, I just didn't want it to seem like we're just following in a, somebody else's wake kind of thing,
Mhm.
and so that led to other storytelling,
Mhm.
so there are things that you have to roll with that evolve. Another example of that is there was a time when we were going to spin Balance off into a separate book where he was going to be this Imperial, but unfortunately it was during like the paper, the supply chain crisis, and there was like paper issues, so it was like that didn't happen, and so instead he went in with Vader. But then I didn't have Valance for a while, so then it became more of a Tonga and the
Yeah.
crew book, which I loved because it became more of an ensemble.
Mhm.
So these were more supporting characters that were kind of elevated to sort of the stars, and then then it was great when we sort of could bring them all together.
Mhm.
So that was all stuff that we just sort of adapted to. Um, but I did know where I wanted. I knew I wanted Tonga eventually to take down Boba Fett. I knew I wanted Valance to find happiness because I'm subjecting them to so much
Right.
cruelty.
It's true.
I knew where I had to bring Tasu Leech, because
Yeah.
he's kind of a more cynical character that doesn't speak basic or anything, in the Force Awakens. So like I wanted to start making him less like innocent and fun and more angry
Mhm.
over the course of the book. Um, you know, so there were things like that I wanted Bosk to betray the group because it's sort of like the frog and the scorpion. It's
The
just his
Trandoshan,
nature. I mean,
Trandoshan.
they eat their siblings, so like what do you expect?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
those kind of things, kind of more or
Mhm.
less, when it happened, evolved, but those
Yeah.
kind of were there. So it was a mix. It was a mix of
Mhm.
planning and dumb luck.
Yeah. I mean, all of that. You say all that, and it makes me amazed at how central Tonga is, at least for me in this story.
Yeah.
When I think about bounty hunters, yeah, it was kind of marketed as with Boba Fett in the tagline because then of course Bylert, who of course comes from Legends, and you mentioned a
Yeah.
lot about Bylert, but then this mother character, who has her own past, of course, with
Yeah.
her family and her brother and Nakano Lash and that crew. That is how she knows Bylert. But then she becomes the leader of this ensemble, and the I'd say the emotional core, at least from my perspective, the emotional core of this story, that from the second half at least drives it, especially after Bylert gets arrested, or gets taken back in by the Empire. Was she? I guess the answer, she wasn't necessarily planned to be this main character, but how did that come about that she became such a prominent part of this story?
Well, she was always going to be like a supporting character,
Mhm.
but it was a weird tug and pull, tug and push
Yeah.
and tug. I don't know, push and pull, where on one hand there was definitely like Mark Paniccia, the brilliant editor of
Mhm.
the Star Wars line. He very much wanted Valance to be front and center in the book because it was a Marvel created character, this very rich character that we basically got back and could introduce into canon.
Mhm.
But then also, there was a contingent that very much wanted the classic Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters to be part of it. And Boba Fett we used as much as we could, but it is just a character I think they like to sort of have a little bit less is more. Right? Boba Fett couldn't be the star of an ongoing at that point in time. I don't know if so it's just it's just too sort of big, and there were plans behind the scenes and all this kind of stuff. So it was going to always be this sort of other bounty hunters. But in order to sort of bridge that, I wanted to create some of our own original characters, and
Yep.
I had Tonga in mind, Tonga and Losha. I wanted them to be a couple. I wanted them to be a couple that's rare in Star Wars, where they're actually happy and not
What? Allowed?
tragic or whatever.
Did the sword group allow that? No.
And then it just ended up being like a kind of fun family dynamic, and like Zuckuss and 4LOM, like you could, it's almost like a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was writing a standalone issue for Zuckuss, which was set on the planet Gand. And I reached out to Story Group. I was like, what do we know about Gand? And they're like, not much. So like I could actually be the first to, show the, in canon to have, okay, well, this is what the planet is like, and this is what their culture is like. And I mean, I can't tell you how I saw Star Wars when I was 4 years old. I saw Empire Strikes Back, and I saw Zuckuss and this crazy insectoid, thing on the bridge when I was 7 years old. I had them on my sheets, and here I am, like, basically plotting out his childhood. So like that was, it's humbling and cool. So yes, it was always a matter of like finding how to connect those and having some original characters. Definitely. And I also knew that, Tonga was also going to have her own PTSD sort of overcoming story. The ones that like surprised me, the one that surprised me, I guess, is Fakora, because I give so much credit to Alyssa because they took that character into Afra, and like she was just a villain like for a plot point in the first arc of my series, and then Alyssa took Fakora, and they just made her so cool that it was like, okay, well now, and then I started thinking of, with Paolo backstory. So that was a character that just evolved over time. Sometimes it's like you're not really in control; they're sort of in control.
Yeah, the thing with bounty hunters for me is exactly what we're talking about, right? You got the mainline comics dealing with Luke, Leia, Lando, and all them, but bounty hunters is something special because it's all these mostly original characters. Now, for you, is it more difficult to write for characters like established like Boba Fett and these other characters that intermingle with Boston, or these like newer characters that might have a blank slate like Zuckuss, like 4LOM? Where's the difficulty? Is it the established characters or is it the blank slate characters, I guess?
I think like in my case, I for the vast, like I have a luxury, as does Alyssa, where we're using characters. When we do use characters in, from live action, we're not really dealing that much except for cameos or guest starring things of like the marquee characters that have a long backstory associated. You know what I mean? Like it's, you take a character like Zuckuss, there isn't that much. I'm not worried about tripping over, some continuity that I didn't know or something. Like I'm just not worried about that because there's a freedom that comes with this level of character that, you think about it. We saw these bounty hunters for seconds in Empire Strikes Back. And then like Bosk has gotten some more development with Clone Wars but for the most part, like you have some freedom with that. And the trickier ones would be like having Darth Vader. Because I wanted to keep I don't know how many people watching this are old enough to remember the original Marvel Comics run from the late 70s and beyond. But the original Valance, he meets his end at first by fighting Darth Vader, and you see it also in Target Vader more recently. Like he's just dumb enough to just go against Vader despite like being the obvious worst move in the world. And so I definitely wanted to sort of, have them. And also Paolo, I asked Paolo once, like, what character is your favorite character to draw? And he said Darth Vader without missing a beat. So I was like, all right, I'm going to work Darth Vader into this, and we did. And so that was to me, but it's challenging. I don't know how Greg does it because Greg does this excellent job for all these issues with a character it's not like Vader walks around telling you his feelings. Like there's not a lot of exposition, so that was, I think, more challenging. That and also Chewbacca, because I've written him twice, once in Bounty Hunters and once in Galaxy's Edge. And I just run out of Wookiee sound effects. Like it's just so so hard to script. And I literally was like poring over like every comic Chewbacca ever appeared in, and I was trying to figure out what the language was. Like when he's saying, like, am I going to put something in it and somebody out there is going to say, "Oh, it's the wrong." That's not.
It's the wrong show.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so I would say that was more challenging than I find it very easy to write the core bounty hunters, actually, and I related to some of them very.
Mhm.
Yeah, and actually Zuckuss and 4 LOM, I kind of just made my own because I envisioned them as murder Bert and Ernie. That was literally like the note I had.
Like
Was murder Bert and Ernie. Like they are Bert and Ernie, but like just they also.
Yeah.
You know,
I can see it. I can see it.
yeah.
I would say Chewie's voice. That's Charles's problem. He can deal with
Yes.
that.
I don't know how. Do not know how he does it. I had 2 issues
Charles.
and I was like banging my head against the
He's
wall.
Charles. You mentioned characters going up against Vader, right? I mean, the only characters we really see go up against Vader are characters with the Force. You know, like Kanan and Cal and Cal Kestis, and obviously Luke Skywalker, that guy. So this gets at an interesting thing. So another confession I should make is, very early on with this story, my jam with Star Wars are the space wizards, are the Jedi, are the mystical element. Chris is more into Underworld, bounty hunters. And so, I mean, I think maybe I don't know if it was a challenge, if you'd say it was a challenge or an opportunity, was to say, okay, what is it about the Underworld? What is it about bounty hunters that makes for just good story, good Star Wars generally, that can appeal to folks like Chris who are kind of already there, and folks like me who, are going to be there because of Star Wars, but maybe need a bit more convincing. And like you mentioned, you connect with the bounty hunter characters themselves. What is it about this this corner of Star Wars that appeals to you?
I think for me, like, just my own as a fan, I gravitate to the Rogue Ones and the Andors and like um just the grounds I view of what's happening, because I think like Star Wars on this macro level is like good versus evil in this cosmic battle of the Empire versus the Rebellion, and or the Resistance versus the First Order. Like it's Jedi versus Sith, but it's on this cosmic scale, and like the average person, be it Ithorian or human or Rhodian or whatever, is just trying to survive in this amid this thing that's much bigger than them. And I kind of felt like, for me, one of the ways in was like, here are a bunch of anti-heroes or heroes, however you want to look at them. They don't particularly care. Maybe Valance might care a little bit, but most of them don't particularly care if the Empire wins or the Rebellion wins, because their life is going to be just as tough. They're going to be eking out, a living, doing a dangerous job, because that's the best way they know how to make a living. Like nothing is going to change for them. And I thought, like, I really like that. I really like that about this part of the world, because they're not, that sort of high-minded morality is just not. They don't have the luxury of that. Right. So I liked that. That's what I gravitated towards. And there's some cool stuff you can do. Would I love to have the occasional, I was so excited when I could get the Knights of Ren to fight the bounty hunter. It was like, oh, there's a lightsaber. If you look really closely, there's a lightsaber. So I did get a lightsaber. I've gotten a few of them here and there, but for the most part, because who doesn't want to? Doesn't want to write a lightsaber battle? So yeah.
Yeah. Then again, that brings me back to Tonga, just because, again, this is my reading of the story. She does embody a morality in the small, in the relationship with Lasha, and the way she's protective of her crew, in a way that still sends them out into danger. And at the end, I mean, this great collision. Okay, Bylert's being taken by the Scourge, and we'll get into the whole crossover issues with crossover, not issues, but the story of the crossovers in a minute. But then again, like you said, betrayed by Bosk and the crew. What would you say? What is kind of the moral core for Tonga, and is that how does that kind of play out in the whole story?
if you go back like all the way, to the beginning of the series, she had a life that she had given up the bounty hunting life. She met someone she loved, she married her, and they started as farmers. I believe it's moisture farmers, but at this point, I don't even remember what they're actually farming. But then, she lost her twin brother, and she comes from a culture where they're, almost not quite psychically linked, but very, very tight. And the person that her former mentor that she blamed, resurfaces, and so she goes after. And at first, it's a mission of revenge, and then this was missed a lot on the initial reading, I think, by many people, but it's sort of like a flashback and a present day sort of interplay. And her twin brother is killed by Boba Fett, and she's been going on this revenge mission, and she's seemingly killed by Boba Fett in the exact same way on the next page, but she survives ultimately, and then she changes, right? Like, so then from there, it's like, I can't keep going down this path. I have to let that go and find a bigger purpose. And so then she decides that she's going to try to protect Cordelia, and she gets a crew together to do that, and then fails miserably when Cordelia doesn't want to go with her. So then it's like, well, what's next? But now she's protective of the crew. So she keeps, what I love about her is she fails. She almost dies. She fails again. She doesn't almost die, but she keeps putting one foot in front of the other. And I love her. I don't know if you can see behind me, I have a Paolo Villanelli original
Nice.
cover of one of the variants, but that's her face. I don't know if you can see it.
A little bit. Hopefully people on a bigger screen can.
But yeah, so I love her especially. I mean, she's my Paolo and my baby, as we say. So yeah. I love how she's come along, and then I've loved that you see a bit of her in Alyssa's Revelation story, and in Mark Guggenheim's Han and Chewie series. And so I just love seeing other writers write this character that I created. This is a sad story, but the very first Star Wars character I ever created, because the first Star Wars story that I got to tell for Marvel, my first ever piece of puzzle piece that I got to put into the giant picture that is the Star Wars franchise, was a 10-page Mace Windu lightsaber story in Age of Republic special. And coincidentally, that artist was Paolo Villanelli. Yeah. Nice. In fact, I have, if I flip the screen here, I have a piece of original art where Mace Windu is fighting this character, Quatako the Grim, that I created. I was so excited. He looked so cool. This villain I created, and I killed him off on page 8 of a 10-page story. So I was telling my daughter, I was like, I got to create, I got to add a new cool character to the Star Wars canon. She's like, yeah, but you killed him in 8 pages. Like, no one's ever going to see him again. And I just
you never know.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
So I actually, if you look at Bounty Hunters, I haven't really killed that many of the major characters. Like, Nakano Lash is probably the only major one I've killed. And part of that was like, I just did not want them to disappear. I learned my lesson. So so Quatako the Grim, we can have a moment of silence for the great villain that never really was. So anyway, that was my first. So I learned a lesson from that.
Yeah. I mean, Halcyon Legacy at that issue that they all come in, that's set after Endor. So there you go.
Let me tell you a little secret. Yeah. I put in Tonga and Losha so that no one kills them.
Yeah.
After I leave. Now we know they're alive till. But I purposely did not put Valance in because I want to keep you guessing as to whether or not he survives.
Yeah, I really liked how you egged on the internet over the last several years about will he or won't he die? That was great. The Valance Nation, everybody getting riled up all the time.
I would also occasionally put in actual grains of truth, like about a year before the storyline when his lover shoots him in the head, actually to save his life, which he doesn't know at the time. And he falls off the cliff. I put, wouldn't it be funny if in issue 31 this happened, and no one. And then when issue 31 comes out, there's all these detectives that found it. It's like, oh my God, he predicted, and so they wonder if all the crap I say holds some sort of importance for the future. But I only would do that occasionally. I did say, like, imagine if 42 ends with all happy endings, and then ha 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 ha. So I did telegraph that.
Yeah. Cordelia going with Tonga and Lasha in there, and I think Vukora, part of that group as well. A nice kind of fun happy ending, kind of going off into the sunset there. I do again another shout out to Charles. I call that all that the Twitter stuff, the Charles Soul School and causing a fuss, causing internet fuss. There we go. You mentioned Cordelia, of course, doesn't want to go with the Edgehawk crew because she's with Kira and doing fine. Actually, Kira's finally taking her seriously, or seems to be. And that, of course, gets us into the great events of in the last few years with Star Wars comics. Of course, I don't know if I want to say Charles Soule helmed it rather, but maybe the question for you.
He was the mastermind.
Yeah.
But the cool thing was, again, I'm biased here because obviously I live this, but I think this era of Marvel Comics is a golden age of Star Wars comics. And I think the two reasons why is, number one, the 4-core series plus all the wonderful spin-offs, including the ones that the Googs wrote, is they are all connected in the same time period. So that allowed for crossovers that had actual meaning for all the different issues. And that also, the fact that these great editors, Mark Paniccia, Danny Chasm, Mikey Basso, Tom Groneman before that, like they all sort of did these weekly Zooms with us. So all the writers were on the Zooms and we got to work together. And Charles was the mastermind behind the crossovers, but also like one of the most collaborative people I've ever met. He'd be like, how can we work in what you want to do in Bounty Hunters here? I'd love to take Valance for a while with Boba Fett. It's like, is there anything you need to come out of this? And I was like, yes, can you please blow him up? Like that was the so it was very, very like collaborative, and he's just like an amazing person to work with, as is everybody in that group. So
no good.
That was pretty much it.
And again, we could tell the way, like we were saying too, this high watermark for Star Wars comics, just because for the canon completionists like we are, right? It's you're really rewarding everyone who read everything. Obviously, I'm also a huge High Republic fan, so loving what's happening there. Maybe just to look at this moment in professionally in your career, what was that collaboration like, and how does that maybe compare and contrast to some other things you've experienced?
I think for the most part, it is you're working by yourself for the most part. Am I frozen? Or okay, I can't tell. Okay, there we go. Okay. For the most part, you're working by yourself. You're trading emails with editors and artists and stuff. So having this sort of group, I always used to joke that I was like Ringo in the super group. No offense to Ringo fans out there, but it just to learn from and collaborate and just get to know these people as friends. That was the best takeaway, because a lot of times, if I'm working on some great stuff and it's fun, but it's very rare that you have that level of interaction and collaboration on anything else really that I've experienced.
Yeah, I really enjoy this era. You were talking about the golden era of Star Wars comics, and this happened to be one of my favorite eras ever because of a little game called Shadows of the Empire. I mean, that was my heyday. I was like 6 or 7. I bought an N64 to play this game. Then I'm getting the IG-88 double pack that came out from Kenner Toys, right? I was all over this era, loved all the characters, and then I got noticed that they were doing the comics in 2020, starting with this, and then going and adding all these, ever getting Kira. It is such a really deep storyline going through all of this. So yeah, I just absolutely love how out of all the time eras, like this was the one that started to really get fleshed out. We don't even have Han Solo around, and yet we're getting all this great smuggler and underworld stuff thanks to you.
Yeah, I mean that's the incredible thing is like arguably, I would say the greatest or the most popular character in Star Wars. You can make a case for Luke, I guess, but or Obi-Wan too, I guess. But like Han Solo not being in it, but casting this big shadow, this square shape or this rectangular shaped shadow, I guess technically. It's kind of amazing because obviously he has an important role, and I wanted to acknowledge that also in the last issue. I want to give a shout out to CB and the rest of the crew at Marvel because one thing is like when the decision is made to and often like you have to do it around like where the trade paperbacks would end, like it's just a natural fit. So like we were coming and it would be naturally like where the Dark Droid saga was going to end, but there's no way I could also do a lot of what I wanted to do. So I basically asked for another issue and they gave me a 30-page issue. And I asked for Paolo to come back for like what I called the Return of the King sort of postscript, the last 20 minutes of the movie, if you will. And they gave me all that. They actually said, why don't you take 30 pages? And so like to have that luxury, I could tell a good, and what I really wanted to do was wrap, because the one thing is like when War of the Bounty Hunters starts, Valance is the kind of person who Han is his friend, and he feels like he owes Han, and so him for saving him in Cadet Solo, and so he would not stop until he was dead, trying to save Han if he knew Han was frozen, which he does, right? Because of War of the Bounty Hunters. I didn't feel like it's right for him to say, "Oh well, I tried," and then like go back as if nothing happened. So I wanted to sort of explain why he never tried. Like we didn't see him elsewhere try, So either one of two things happened. He tried and failed and was killed, which I can understand as a reader of Bounty Hunters. You would assume I'd go that route. Or he had to play some part in the rescue, like some secondary role, but was important. And so I really wanted to give him that win. And so, that was like kind of like the idea behind that last adventure.
Yeah, that was really great tying in again, having that collaboration, tying in the big droid from Mark Guggenheim's line, like that was a home run issue, really connecting, as we said before in the show.
I talked to Mark a lot. I talked to him about the neural core. I know that was big for the editors to sort of put that in there as well, and so we had a whole way that it all fit together. And I love the idea of this lovable idiot who instead of like sneaking around and trying to like sabotage it through like some sort of ninja like mission, he just like goes in, gets himself caught, and basically offers himself up to be killed by this giant droid, and then defeats him that way. Like this the least safe way to do it,
Yeah.
It just felt like him.
Yeah, and I mean, thinking about the crossover event, and I mean, Valance specifically being this underworld character, he's with the Empire a bit, but this underworld character that's also a cyborg, and of course an underworld line that's also a cyborg. How much would you say, because Bounty Hunters then would be the perfect, the perfect piece, and I say in a way I want to say what's the cornerstone, but the integral piece to this Crimson Reign saga, a Crimson Dawn saga, and then the Dark Droids aspect to it at the end. How would you say Bounty Hunters impacted the whole crossover event, and how would you say Bounty Hunters was impacted by the everything else happening?
I mean, I think these events were so huge that they affected everybody.
Mhm.
So, like, I don't know that it was necessary. Even War of the Bounty Hunters, which has Bounty Hunters in its title, it was basically this, you know, Crimson Dawn coming up with, this dropping this basically this atomic bomb on everybody. Like, here's Han Solo, and um, and it's part of a larger plan, and ultimately she's going after the Sith, and so obviously the bounty hunters are maybe less integral to that plan, but they're swept up in it all, because of the warring syndicates and other things, and then Vader is using Valance, and the bounty hunters are sent, and so they end up sort of crossing paths. In Dark Droids, there was actually a story that I wanted to do, and I was excited to bring in Inferno Squad for this story.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so
My God,
good.
I can't tell you. And I got to talk to like one of the creators of
Mhm.
and
Wow.
I got to there's just some fun because I have no issue with the bounty hunters crew getting their butts kicked by superior opponents, like Knights of Ren, like Inferno Squad, but them trying to, like, they're hopelessly outclassed, but they're trying to sort of, and so I knew I wanted a guy. It was a very personal story for me, like him losing his memory.
Mm.
And I've said this before, but basically, like, as I get older, um, I'm very aware, like, I'm forgetting things, like little facts, like my fourth grade classmate or something like that I used to know, but just over time, my grandmother's voice is getting fading, and like I realize that my cousin and I are probably like the last in my family that my father died in 1995, my grandmother died in 1995, and like my grandfather died like when I was 3, and like when I go, it's like they die with me. You know what I mean? Like this, like I have their memory, and that's been a very personal thing. And so the idea of him losing his memory is like losing his memory of his mother, but living with that kind of, I was like, I got to work this in somehow. So then
Mhm.
then it sort of slotted in nicely to the Dark Droids, because then it sort of made him this empty vessel that they could use as the Scourge could use as as like a WMD.
Mhm.
But I knew I wanted to do something with him losing his memory and turning into a killing machine, and them trying to salvage. So like we had set up way back in issue 1819 that the Empire had backed up
Right.
his memories up to a certain point, so that would be our MacGuffin to sort of get him almost back to normal.
Yeah.
But until then, I could play with this feeling of what it's like to lose these memories and know that these people that mattered so much to you are sort of, kind of fading away. All right, it's kind of a downer. Sorry, guys.
No, no,
That
it's
was,
real. It's real life. Here for it.
Yeah,
I worked a lot of personal stuff
Yeah.
through the.
I gotta say though, it's great to see, right, on this level of like, all right, we got this awesome action-packed bounty hunter comic with all these really cool side characters I love, and then you're just hitting me like a truck emotionally, ripping out my heart at these
Yeah.
moments. Like, Ethan, what is he doing? Like, this is emotionally impactful stuff more than any of the comics otherwise that I've read. It's like just amazing how, again, these aren't even characters on the screen. And I'm getting this amount of emotional resonance coming from these pages of a comic book. It's really powerful stuff. So
Oh,
again,
thank you.
hats off to you for
Yeah,
really driving
I
home these
appreciate that.
great moments. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Would you say that that comes from, in part, that appeal of characters on the ground? Again,
Yeah,
I mean, I keep going back to Tonga, but yeah, I mean, Byler too, in his
yeah,
relationships. I mean, to say, I guess kind of what you're suggesting here is that the plan for the person on the other side of that last issue, that uh last frame, the page there
mm.
would be the partner. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, but uh,
Giala?
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Hayden is the last name, because named after Hayden Christensen.
Nice.
Ha! Nice.
There we go. Yeah, and to be this, I mean, this sign of hope and restoration of his identity is that maybe what you were going for, and was that
Yeah,
thing seated in early
yeah.
on?
I wanted to, I'm handing off the baton to whoever comes next with whoever uses these characters next in whatever form. So I wanted to leave it on an upbeat note for most of them. Maybe not Bosk. Maybe he feels a little guilt somewhere in his reptilian brain. But for the most of them, I wanted it to be, because I put them through some miserable stuff, and that was, the theme was overcoming that trauma, right? Like that was like very important to me, and I think like a lot of the readers in Valance Nation and beyond who really felt a connection to it, I think that's one of the things they connected to.
Yeah.
Every time these lovable losers get knocked down, they pick themselves up and try again, and
Yeah.
so
I mean, that's another theme about people who are more relatable on the ground floor. That don't always succeed, don't always win. I mean, Luke, of course, in Empire and the whole rebellion takes the L then too, but that's just one film. This is definitely appreciate that.
You could argue they took the L because this New Republic didn't last very long, and then they like literally their hard fought victory ended up being tragically ultimately not a victory. I have a quick question. So I see some very good questions in the comments. Should I answer them out loud? Should I try to?
If you'd like to. We can give that's a good transition moment too. I can get to Joel's here. Did you take inspiration from other Legend stuff? Because we mentioned Byler, but Tales of the Bounty Hunters, Tales from Jabba's Palace.
Yes, I do. I always look for other Legend stuff, but also like not even just Legend stuff. Like take Deathstick. I just I never actually played that video game, but I could never get that trailer out of my head. So I was like, the chance to put her in, nobody objected. But yes, it specifically to answer Joel's question, Tales of the Bounty Hunters, which was released in the 90s. It's a collection of, for those of you who don't know, like individual stories about Dengar and basically all the major Empire Strikes Back era bounty hunters. Specifically, the Dengar story, I actually took a lot about his backstory, including his love affair with Manaru, who certainly deserves better than him. So yeah, I did take little details. Certainly also Bosk some of the religious Trandoshan religious stuff from there as well. So yeah, that one specifically was a big one for me. I also took a lot out of the previous Marvel run. I was inspired by some things from some other, Dark Horse and things like that, but I wouldn't say there was like any kind of direct stuff in there. But yeah, Legends. There's little Easter eggs and tips of the cap as well.
And these are of course both prose stories. I don't know. Is that maybe in the cards for you to be writing more prose? Do you have experience with that a bit? Or?
I've never actually written. My previous experience was as a journalist, so I've written like 3,000 word articles or things like that. But I've never actually written prose professionally. But who knows? I dabbled in some talks once. I don't know if anything. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, so yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Question from Ben. Speaking of transitioning to different media, anything you've created that secretly makes the jump from paper to screen, TV or film?
I would love to see some of these characters make a live action debut. Tonga and Moshe would be top of that list, but I'd love to see Baylor too. I've gotten into some good-natured sort of battles with Valance Nation over the casting of Baylor, Valance, and I think Carl Urban would be my pick.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
He was in
That's-
Star Trek, so I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm a kid. Yeah. This is just entirely speculation. When do you think Afra is going to make the jump to live action?
I mean, I don't know the answer, but it's whenever
yeah.
it is,
Just when do you think?
it's not soon enough is the answer. Because I mean, that is like the perfect Disney Plus series right there.
Yes.
Like,
Hmm.
you know, Star Wars meets Indiana Jones. Like literally, that's the high concept pitch. Like that.
Yep.
If I was sitting in a boardroom, I would expect to get a promotion in a corner office by just saying those words out loud.
Yes.
So yeah.
Now, what we really hope is Alyssa can be in the room and be able to make.
Yeah, I hope they would get to be in the writers' room on that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think we can good to shift a little bit forward. We mentioned mentioned off the top you had the Django mask. So I'll bring it up. I mean, so one of the things I'm looking forward to. So again, I said I'm a prequelist. And Chris is bounty hunter Underworld, and so that's the perfect comic for us because it's in the era, but with with this character that has this. I mean, Screen has developed a bit more in terms, like Book of Boba Fett developed a bit more about his backstory. Of course, there is the Legends comic, and it goes into it too. You have recently gone back to that era in Bounty Hunters number 38 with Telemac confronting him, and so confronting Grievous. Sorry, it's not the same era. I don't know if
37. I did get to write Django in 37.
Yes.
And I got a little because the whole conceit of that issue was sort of Boba Fett having this information that his father had gotten. So there's a little bit of sort of back and forth with the flashbacks, but I really got the bug to write Django from that limited, single issue experience. Here's what I love about Django so much in comparison to Boba Fett. Boba Fett is awesome. I'm glad I got to write Boba Fett. They're very different characters, despite having a lot of this, having the same ship, having the same weaponry for the most part. Probably a lot of overlap in their skill set. What I think the big difference is Boba Fett having, and I'm somebody like I lost my father when I was 22. Boba Fett was was whatever 8, something like that, and that void, like it just makes him a more haunted and sort of there's a darkness that he carries with him. And I also kind of, when I wrote him almost like a Jason Voorhees type, where it's like a force of nature that comes in, doesn't say much, kills a bunch of people, And I think Django Fett, at least in the point in time that I have him, is more of that kind of swashbuckling, type of hero. Like there's a sort of a lighter version in terms of he's not carrying that heaviness on him in the same way. So it's a little bit more fun, and there's less because I'm writing him. This is set before the Phantom Menace. I won't say how much before.
Sure.
I won't say any details, but it's before. So there's all this shadowy stuff going on. That we may as readers kind of infer things from, but the people going through it don't necessarily know. So it's interesting how much I got to get away with in this, sort of tying the story into a larger story, let's just say, that I think has been a lot of fun. It's just a fun character to write. This has like that. I definitely incorporate as much as I incorporate Star Wars mythos. I incorporate some westerns that I love. There's this some obscure ones too, like The Bounty Man, which is this movie where the title character basically is after a robber and goes into this town, knows that they're there, but doesn't know what they look like or who they are, and it's like that kind of. There's all this stuff that I kind of got to work in as little homages. so it's been a lot of fun. This is just a lot. It's a very different book. There's a little mystery. There's some intrigue, a whole lot of blaster fire.
Nice.
Yeah, it's certainly because it's a tighter story in that like I don't have 4 years worth of threads to try to figure out how to tie up.
Yeah, yeah. Jango Fett happens to be, I say this sometimes, like my favorite prequel character. I mean, it goes back to when I seen the trailer for episode 2 in 2001 or 2002, and just seeing Slave One and seeing this guy Mandalorian armor. It looks a lot like Boba Fett fighting off against a Jedi Knight in the rain on this foreign planet I haven't seen before. Like all this imagery. But my favorite color is blue, so the blue and the steel. I'm like, all right, this guy automatically looks really, really cool from the get-go.
Yeah.
And we know that this character was picked specifically for a reason to be a template for the clone army. So I've been like nipping at the bud to get like more stories about him, because canon has really left him, other than your story, which was awesome that we got in Bounty Hunters. There's really a really clean slate. I'm surprised this far into the Disney Lucasfilm era that we haven't seen. So when I heard this was announced, and now you're saying it's even before the Phantom Menace, I'm very, very curious to see like the beginning of his reputation really taking hold, and us seeing some really cool stuff. Be like, this is why this is the guy, not Cad Bane or something. Like
yeah. I don't know. You'd want an army of Cad Banes or anything. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me what you're saying. We have the image of Boba Fett. I'm thinking of even the McNiven cover, the director's edition cover to Bounty Hunters, or War of the Bounty Hunters #1.
Yeah.
Just that very Western look, swashbuckling look, but like you said, a very much more quieter, silent force of nature. Seems to me it's something character going to have that look, that visual language, and yet be a lot more playful and younger. Is that kind of what you're playing with there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my mantra for this series was, and I think Chris alluded to this, is like he's building this reputation that makes these larger forces take notice, and perhaps so this is sort of earlier in his. I mean, he's in his career enough that a lot of people know enough to fear him, but he's still making a name for himself.
Yeah.
And I got to play with some cool bounty hunters from that era as well, which was nice.
Yeah.
At least one of which you may know of from Revelations.
Nice. Yes. So the Revelations, I guess, is like the prelude that takes place before issue #1 of this series.
Actually, it's within the story. It's not replicated, but it happens between issue 1 and issue 2.
Oh.
So he's already looking for something that he finds out about in issue 1, but it's part of, without spoiling it too much, he's looking in many places for leads. So that is one of them. But it was like a kind of fun 6-page story, and anytime I get to reunite with Will Sliney, who I worked with on Galaxy's Edge and Halcyon Legacy, I'm in.
This question about influences, I mentioned so there's the Jango Fett game, I forget what the Legends comic is called, the one about his origins, and that conflict with Death Watch.
I have it somewhere around here, but
I've read that one.
I would say not exactly. Like I would say I looked at all this stuff for the sort of the tone of the character, but like no Easter, like I just didn't dive in. Like a lot of this is sort of new. So I would say inspirations maybe rather than anything specific.
Okay, that's fair. Can you share what kinds of inspirations then?
No.
Okay, fair.
not because I'm a jerk, although but just I anything I say I kind of feel like might spoil stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
And I'm definitely one of those people who believes you'll enjoy it more if you come in without knowing what to expect.
Yeah. So I have a question with I've seen all your beautiful action figures. Now, do you actually? We've heard other creators into space like play with their action figures to like put in their head about what the battles might look like or the skirmishes. Do you do something like that yourself? Like have a moment where you're kind of like go back into
I
kid
did.
form and you're just like
I
fighting
used
with
to
the
do
gun.
that. I used to do that, and it sounds like more fun than it is. But I would try to choreograph things,
Mhm.
and actually, then I read Charles Soule's script for War of the Bounty Hunters, the Alpha issue,
Mhm.
and and he was writing for Steve McNiven, right, like one of the great artists, and he would put like for the scene, what the key beats would be, but basically you go have fun, like as long as by the end of this happens.
Mhm.
And that was such a revelation for me because like why am I spending all my time when I'm working with these great visual engineers, why am I spending all my time telling them how to visualize, you know
Right.
what I mean? And so then I started, especially with Paolo, who is just brilliant, like he has this kinetic
Mm,
feel, like it feels like you really
mhm.
feels three-dimensional with the motion and like the power behind it. So I'm like, what, I should let the maestro step up to the podium and like, and so then I started the action scenes. I'd say like, page 11 through 13. This is
Mhm.
where Tasu Leech, fights a Rathtar with his bare hands or
Mhm.
whatever it was, that didn't happen, but not till later. It didn't, and
Two
and
decades
it didn't
later.
last 3 pages.
Yeah.
But so I would leave that room.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, definitely could tell that for sure. I mean, uh, some of the best comics action I've seen,
Mm,
especially Paolo.
Yeah.
No, and no shade to anyone else, but definitely, yeah, it really felt engaging and just the motion and the impacts of the action. But again, it's actually within a very very heartfelt story and very emotionally
He's
engaged story.
fantastic.
So definitely, the action served the story really well.
mhm.
We have reached the hour. Chris, do you have any further things you'd like to ask Ethan before we let him
Yeah,
go?
I would say overall, like what would you tell somebody like you start with journalism, for instance? What would you
Mm,
tell somebody like that might be listening or watching how to get started with just writing comics in general? Maybe they're in a completely different field or something.
yeah,
How'd you transition? I guess just tips.
sure. Well, the shortest version of my not so secret origin story is I covered for many years for the New York Daily News. I covered with the quote unquote geek beat, which was awesome.
Hmm.
I got it pretty much because when I started, it was a bunch of older features writers. No one really cared about this stuff except for me. So I got to write about comics and Star Wars and later Game of Thrones and
Hmm.
Walking Dead and all this kind of stuff. You know, just about horror, occasionally video games, all this kind of stuff. So I got to know people over the years. Joe Quesada, former editor in chief of Marvel, later chief creative officer of Marvel, became a good friend of mine. I did a Star Wars related interview with an actor, Paul Blake, who played Greedo, in 2016 for an article that I pitched for May the Force be with you, May the Fourth be with you, and they let me do it, which was basically like talking about the whole who shot first thing,
Nice.
and I got to talk to Greedo himself. It was just a funny interview. He was talking about Greedo being myopic because of the eyes and like missing, but he did say it said in the script Han shoots alien. So I had this idea. There's a very famous Japanese movie by the director Kurosawa, who's influenced George Lucas greatly, which was based on a Japanese novel called Rashomon, and it's a like a murder in feudal Japan. But the gimmick behind it is it's four different witnesses, including the ghost of the murder victim, and all the accounts are completely different. So I had this idea, it just popped in my head, of doing the murder investigation into Guido's death. Um, and like no witnesses are telling the exact same story. Uh, just the same structure. So it's clearly an homage. I couldn't get out of my head. It was making me laugh. And so I was at a Mets game with Joe, and I was like, "Do you mind if I send you a spec script? I'm a reporter, so like, if on the off chance it's published, I'll just donate the money to charity. We'll be very public about it." Um, and he was like, "Sure, whatever." He was not editor in chief at that point. He's not directly involved with the day to day comics.
Mhm.
He's not enthusiastic, but he agreed to look at it. So I never wrote a comic book script before. I quickly did everything. I read a million of them. I sort of cherry picked the ones that I really loved, and I looked at how they were formatted, how they were paced. I had this rough idea, and I contacted a publicist that I worked with at Lucasfilm, on the movie side, and she ended up putting me in touch with Pablo Hidalgo, so I could ask these questions. And it's like, basically, the most important thing is Greedo shot first, like that's canon, like. But I still played around with that. So I came up with a story. I send it out in the email to Joe, and I don't hear anything for weeks. So I think, okay, he must have really hated this. I went to Japan. My wife's Japanese, and we went to visit my in-laws. The plane lands back in New York on September 7th, 1996, sorry, 2016.
Okay.
And the day it changed my life, basically, because I get an email from Joe, and the subject line is F Greedo. So I think, wow, he really must have hated it. But the tone of it was, never mind Greedo, just to paraphrase it in a family-friendly way. Never mind Greedo, you can actually write. And I'm kind of pissed that I've known you for all these years and I did not know this. So like, he basically was so excited about the script that he brought it to Axel Alonso, who was the then editor-in-chief. He loved it. It never actually got published for reasons, but it got me in the door at Marvel. So literally and that is not a recommendation I give anyone unless they know somebody at Marvel for 20 years and they know you as a writer in other capacities or something. They don't take spec scripts, and there are legal reasons for that. Because if they look at a script and it's similar to something that's in the pipeline or something, then like they open themselves up to potential like legal issues or whatever. And so like no one wants to read a spec script. That's just not the way to do it. The better way to do it is, so I'm not an example to anyone, is the point of this story. But there are things that I've learned. And Jim Zub has a great, if you Google his advice to people trying to break in, he wrote a blog entry about it that's just he's a great writer and a great sharer of information for others. So anyway, the thing to do is to write comics, and there are more opportunities now than there ever were before to publish them online, to eventually find an anthology, things like that. Like whatever you can do to showcase how you tell a sequential story, because you may have the greatest Spider-Man story that's ever been thought of. No one's going to read that synopsis or whatever from somebody who has no experience. It's just not going to. They're not going to entrust this character that is their golden child to some stranger that they don't know. So like they're not going to read your brilliant idea. And so you should be thinking about your brilliant idea that is not some other person's IP or some other company's IP to start with, and make some examples of your storytelling. And also, the more you do, the better, because like you will get better the more you dabble in this field. And I would say it's hard to break in, but people do break in. So I think like the thing is actually do it, which sounds hard, but there are ways. Like think about all these great success stories where people have published their online comics and someone has picked it up or optioned it. It happens. So that's step one. And become a better writer as you do it, or artist, or whatever. Because you definitely need an artist, by the way. Like comics is a visual medium. So if you're a writer, you need to pair yourself with an artist, and there's two ways you can do that. And like one is you basically come in as partners of some kind, but they're still doing the harder work. So generally, you need to pay an artist. But if you have a friend who can draw really well, and you team up and you agree to split whatever comes out of it, that might be an option too. So it's either co-ownership or you're paying the artist. Like you can't ask for like exposure or something like that's just not fair. So but you can self-finance. You can even a black and white comic which you don't have coloring, like what they're really looking for is how you tell a story. So you start doing that. You go to conventions and try to meet editors when they're doing things like portfolio reviews or sitting down for advice. Introduce yourself, showcase your work. They're always looking for new talent. But you have to have something to show them. And I think people also get like blinded by the ideas like, oh my God, I want to write Star Wars. I have the best Star Wars idea. And it's really cool, but at the same time, like, it's even cooler when you have your own stories to write that. So I don't know. I've gone on. Very long answer.
It's a good answer.
No, great answer. Great answer for all of us out there watching and listening. And speaking of creator, I don't want you to leave this show until you tell us about the comic that you're writing with your daughter right now.
Yeah.
So please share.
So it's called A Haunted Girl, and I'm going to overshare with the audience today. And basically, while I was writing Galaxy's Edge #2, my daughter basically was hospitalized, a freshman in high school at the time, with severe depression, and she was suicidal. So kind of caught us off guard. We as parents, our lives pretty much changed almost instantaneously. Because we missed a lot of warning signs. And I remember being in the because I was a freelancer, I just need my laptop. I was working out of the hospital cafeteria in between visiting hours, like when I could go upstairs. So I'm writing away on my deadlines for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and I was like, I want to come up with a story that will inspire her to keep wanting to live and keep fighting. And I wrote down in my reporter's notepad one line, which was, "The fate of all life rests with a girl who doesn't know if she wants to live." And I was like, I'm going to write a story around this line. I reached out to an artist I worked with, Marco Lorenzana, who was the artist on the very first Marvel 8-page story that I did it was like a Daily Bugle story for a Secret Empire tie-in. So he was on board, and it took, we started working on concept art and like outlines and all this kind of stuff. We were very close to a deal with a publisher in February of 2020. And then the pandemic happened, and we lost that opportunity. It was never quite at the finish line anyway. But because we had this extra time, my daughter had gotten to a better point where I asked her to write it with me to try to maybe help others. So she did. We got a deal with Syzygy, an imprint of Image, and we teamed up with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the American Psychiatric Association. So we had some resource guides in the back of the book. We've gotten some great feedback, and seems to resonate with some people. And the last of 4 issues is out on February 21st, but the trade paperback is out on May 21st for Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a horror story. I know this sounds like, oh my God, it's an after-school special, but it's very much a horror story where the protagonist is going through all this fresh out of the hospital and trying to, get back to school and all this kind of stuff and fighting all these feelings. And it turns out she's the only one who can potentially save everybody from this supernatural apocalypse. And it's very inspired by like Japanese horror movies. My daughter is half Japanese, so she loves those kind of, The Ring and The Grudge and all that kind of stuff. So the visuals are very very like Japanese ghost kind of thing. Yeah, it looks and Marco is just a brilliant artist, so it looks really good. And Joe Quesada, who has helped my life in so many ways, contributed a cover for the first issue as a gift to support the cause.
It's definitely we love genre fiction, we love Star Wars because of the way it talks about real life, and so to see this comic do some real good in the real world, really wonderful to see. I'm looking forward to picking that one up for sure.
Same.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think that about the time. Thank you so much, Ethan, for coming on.
My pleasure.
Definitely
Thanks for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your support over the years.
Yeah, all good.
Of course. Yeah.
Where can they find you on the internet, and anything else you'd like to plug?
Well, I'm still on X/Twitter for now. Ethan J. Sachs. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. I'm kind of dabbling in Threads, but I'm not really there very much. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I appreciate everyone's fandom, and that's what makes this galaxy so beautiful. It's just something for everybody.
There you go. Yeah. Thanks so much, Chris. Where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter/X at StarRaptor. You can find my latest blog. I did a review on starraptor.substack.com for Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. Not a very good game. Not a very good game. But and that was my first video game review, mind you. It's like
Yeah.
the
Oh.
first video game review written one I've done. I've done video reviews. Happens to be like one of the worst games I've played in a while. I'm like, this is not going to start off with a bang here. But if you want to read that and find my thoughts there, and then youtube.com/StarRaptor for Star Wars, different things. So
Yes, right. You can follow me Instagram and Threads, MNEUG1138, Twitter, NEUG485. This Monday, Joel and I are on the Ion Cannon podcast at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We're talking about ships, we're talking about Valentine's Day. It's two single dudes talking about romance. It's what you want to hear on. Next Wednesday, it's a normal Wednesday for me. It's Ash Wednesday, which is special for me in Churchland. It's a normal Wednesday for me otherwise. I don't know about you, Chris, but we're gonna record. We're gonna talk about Mace Windu and High Republic Adventures coming out. And
Darth Vader.
And Darth Vader, yes, that's right. I did mean to check, but got the interview notes doing that. So yeah, please do join us next week. Wednesdays are for comics. Comics are for Wednesdays. That's been the Tractor Beam Comics Review. Chris, thanks for helping out. Ethan, thanks again for coming on. Until then, happy reading.
Sounds good.
All right.